All right, today we're going to dig into the absolutely wild, ghoulish history of horror comics. We're talking shocking art, a full-blown public panic, and a monster that, believe it or not, just refused to stay dead. So let's crack open this crypt, shall we?
Okay, before we really dive in, just look at these. Seriously, take a second to soak this in. This was the world of horror comics in their heyday. We're talking completely wild, totally uncensored, and yeah, incredibly popular. Severed heads, ghouls crawling out of graves, you name it, nothing was off the table.
So how on earth did we get to that? Well, picture this. It's the late 1940s, early 50s. World War II is over, but there's this anxiety in the air. Superheroes, they were kind of losing their shine. And right into that gap, this brand new genre just explodes onto the scene. It was pulling from the creepy old pulp magazines and those spooky radio dramas that had everyone huddled around the radio. Yeah, this new wave of comics, it had zero interest in saving the world. No, this was all about ghosts, ghouls, and, everything that goes bump in the night. Most of them were these little anthology stories, each one like a quick shot of pure nightmare fuel, designed to give you a real jolt. And right at the heart of this whole explosion was one publisher that really stood out, EC Comics. You've got to understand, under a guy named William Gaines, EC they perfected the formula. The art was incredible, just stunningly detailed and super shocking for the time. And the stories? They were legendary for these clever, often grim twist endings. And of course, you had these amazing hosts like the Crypt Keeper, cracking jokes while standing over a coffin.
And when you're that successful, well, everyone wants a piece of the pie. A whole horde of imitators popped up. And just look at this chart. It shows you how massive this thing really got. Now, we all remember EC, right? They're the famous ones. But check this out. Atlas Comics, which would later become Marvel, absolutely dwarfed them. We're talking almost 400 horror issues. That's insane. At the absolute peak, something like 1 out of every 4 comics on the newsstand was a horror comic.
But of course, a party this wild can't last forever. This whole creative explosion was about to run headfirst into a real-life monster. And honestly, this one was way scarier than anything you'd find in the comics. I'm talking about pure, unadulterated public outrage, and it was all being stirred up by one very powerful man. And here he is, Dr. Frederick Wortham. In 1954, he drops this bombshell of a book called Seduction of the Innocent. And look, he wasn't just saying, oh, I don't like these comics. No. He was claiming they were the direct cause of kids becoming criminals, of crime, of what he called sexual deviancy. And the scary part? He was a well-respected psychiatrist. So when he said something, people took it seriously.
I mean, some of the claims he made were just shocking, and a lot of them had, zero evidence. This quote here is a perfect example of his thinking. He'd look at a cover and see all sorts of hidden, twisted meanings. He claimed comics were pushing everything from violence to homosexuality. He's actually the guy who famously said Batman and Robin were a homosexual wish dream. Just wild stuff. So Wortham's crusade just lights this match, and the media turns it into a full-blown firestorm. It got so huge, so out of control, that it went all the way to the United States Senate. That's right, the government actually held televised hearings to investigate whether comic books were destroying the youth of America. And William Gaines, the head of EC Comics, he goes to Washington to defend his work. He's defiant, he's proud of what he makes, but oh man, did it backfire. At one point, a senator holds up this super gory cover, with a severed head, and asks him if he thinks it's in good taste. And Gaines, without missing a beat, gives this infamous answer. The next day, the headlines were a disaster. That moment, that basically sealed the deal. It was over. So with the threat of the government stepping in, the entire comics industry panics. They decide, okay, we'll police ourselves. And what they came up with was a set of rules that was basically a creative guillotine, especially for horror comics. This thing was called the Comics Code Authority, the CCA, and just look at this list. It tells you everything you need to know. The code specifically banned all scenes of horror, excessive bloodshed, gore, ghouls, vampires, werewolves. I mean, they even banned the words horror and terror from comic book titles. It wasn't a haircut, it was a decapitation. The entire genre was wiped out, literally overnight. And the effect was just immediate and devastating. You can see it so clearly here in this before and after. Everything that was gory and explicit became, tame mystery stories. All the classic supernatural monsters, gone. They were replaced by silly-looking sci-fi aliens because that was somehow okay.
It was a complete shift from total creative freedom to just heavy, heavy censorship. But here's the thing about monsters, right? You can't keep a good one buried for long. The genre was down, but it wasn't out. And a bunch of creators who absolutely loved horror started looking for clever ways to dig it back out of its grave. And this was the brilliant escape plan. Publishers like a company called Warren found this amazing loophole. See, the Comics Code only applied to what was technically a comic book. So what did they do? They started publishing these bigger black and white magazines. You might have heard of them. Creepy and eerie. Because they were magazines, not comics, they didn't need the code stamp of approval. And just like that, horror was back. So you have this underground movement bubbling up, and eventually the code itself starts to weaken. Check out the timeline. First, in 71, the code finally relaxes a bit and says, okay, fine, you can have classic monsters like vampires and werewolves. And what does Marvel do? They immediately launch stuff like Tomb of Dracula. Then you get to the 80s, and a writer named Alan Moore gets his hands on Swamp Thing and just completely redefines what horror comics could be, making them deep, smart, and for a modern adult audience. And that revival just opened the floodgates. From those early days of fighting back, horror comics have grown into this massive, diverse, and critically acclaimed art form all over the world. I mean, it's something those senators back in 1954 could never, ever have imagined.
Seriously, today the genre is a global force. In North America, you get these huge character-driven epics like The Walking Dead. Over in Italy, they're famous for Dylan Dog, which is this amazing mix of psychological drama and, erotic horror. And then you have Japan. And masters like Junji Ito, who create this deeply unsettling cosmic dread and body horror that will just burrow into your brain and stay there.
So think about that. The very thing that was supposed to be corrupting children is now this hugely respected source for pop culture. It's kind of ironic, right? A series like The Walking Dead isn't just a comic book anymore, it's a global TV phenomenon. It just goes to show you how powerful this medium really is. So when you look back, it's an incredible story. The art form that terrified a generation of parents and politicians, well, it ended up surviving its own real-life horror movie. It literally clawed its way out of the grave that censorship had dug for it, and it evolved into something stronger and more varied than ever before. Which really just leaves us with one last kind of chilling question to think about. 70 years ago, a comic book could scare an entire country. In our age of endless content where we feel like we've seen everything, what would it actually take to scare us today?